So that additional sounds are not disturbing.
I'm going to just take about 3 minutes to introduce both of you, and then we can, Professor Devi can start for 20 minutes, and then you can join in and we can have the discussion. That's a simple, yeah, that's a, okay. Okay.
I just may have some bandwidth problems, so I may keep my video off if I suffer lower signal. Yeah.
Okay. I think when you talk, you can switch it on. You can keep the, if you can, yeah. And good afternoon. Welcome to the French Institute of Pondicherry, an autonomous institution run by the Foreign Ministry of French government and the CNRS. And yesterday it was celebrated as the International Day of Old Indigenous People, August 9th. And here in Pondicherry, the southern part of Tamil Nadu, we are very much still in lockdown during this pandemic. And this whole aim of this webinar is to know about the indigenous people of India during this pandemic and during this shutdown, because it is told to be the indigenous in different parts of India are somewhat isolated. And we do also know that many of the migrant laborers who have faced the plight were actually belonging to the communities of indigenous people. So in this context, we also have to face during this the oncoming new educational policy unveiled by the central government, and also the environmental clearances regulation, which is being discussed. So in our webinar, we have two eminent scholars, Professor Ganesh Devi, and he has been almost devoted his whole life to the conservation and the preservation of indigenous languages, and he has been responsible for bringing out news magazines and newsletters in indigenous languages, and he has also been the key person behind the mammoth volume, the big volumes of the People's Survey of Indian Languages in India, which is a very important one. He's a kind of a foremost specialist with reference to indigenous communities. Then we have Professor Mins, who's the Vice Chancellor of Sidho Kanhu Murmu University, and previously she used to be in the Department of Computer Science in JNU, and she's not new to Tamil Nadu because she studied in Tamil Nadu, and she's been of an Indian university. So we have two persons. One person actually I can say from that indigenous community who has gone on to become a kind of a face of an university in India. Then we have Mr. Ganesh Devi, who actually coming in essence maybe from without, who has studied that community, who have dealt with those languages and the problems. So we are very keen to how do you evaluate the situation now with reference to the indigenous people. And first I invite Professor Devi to talk and discuss for about 20 minutes, and then Professor Mins will follow. And if we have any time left, both of them can discuss with each other. Then we can also look for some questions from the audience who have joined. Thank you. Please, Professor Devi.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your generous words. And also thank you for creating this wonderful opportunity of meeting Professor Mins. And for all of us in this country, she's one person about whom we feel very proud. So thank you indeed. And thank you also for thinking of the indigenous people from where you are, the French Institute. Because it is a fact.
Yeah, your audio is not very clear, sir. Can you put the mic close to you?
Yes, indeed. I hope it is now. I hope it is.
We can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. So I was saying I thanked you for your kindness, and also thanked you for bringing this great opportunity of being with Professor Mins. I said she's one person about whom all of us in India feel very proud. And it's a great idea to have this colloquium from where you are, the French Institute, because it is a fact of history that wherever the colonial powers went, there alone we have this class of persons called the indigenous people. I mean, they're in the former colonies of Britain, former colonies of Spain, and former colonies of France. And their presence is an ironic, a rather saddening testimony of what the colonial powers did to the local people, particularly in Australia, where there was complete extermination, and in North America, where there was a lot of battlement between the white invaders and the indigenous people, the Indians. Where the Spanish went, they did not exterminate all of the indigenous, but shockingly, about 95% of the local population was exterminated. In Africa and in India, the situation is different.
Maybe you can switch off your camera and maybe we can hear your voice without breaking. Sir, maybe you can switch off your camera. We will be able to hear you because your voice is breaking. Maybe you can just we can go with the audio. Yeah.
In Africa and in India, the situation has not been that bad as in Australia or in North America or South America. However, of the approximately 36 crores of indigenous people, out of the 850 total global population, which is roughly 5% of the population, total global population, we have in our country 9% who are indigenous. But these 9% indigenous communities are not culturally, socially, historically all uniform in their attributes, in characteristics, and in their conditions of existence. There is a great diversity among them. The first marker of this diversity is there are Adivasis in the central belt of India, including the Gonds, the Bhils, the Santals. And then there are communities in the northeast where they've been included in the category irrespective of their histories, their cultural being, their level of economic and social development. Finally, there is yet another category or class of people in this country, and these are the communities now known as denotified and nomadic tribes. They are not exactly like the Adivasis, not like the Gonds, the Mundas, the Santals, the Bhils. But these also have been a product of the colonial misunderstanding of the complexity of Indian society. This particular category, the DNTs, came into being because of an atrocious act of 1871 that Lord Mayo's council brought in. Lord Mayo promulgated this Criminal Tribes Act, the CTA, and overnight turned perfectly innocent communities into permanently stigmatized, branded, and therefore accursed communities. The Adivasis, on the other hand, have a slightly different history. And these are a product of a certain settlement of land ownership during the colonial times. Very briefly, I can say that after 1820s, that is the first quarter of the 19th century, some 200 years before our time, after the Indian princes had been defeated, the British did not know how to acquire the remaining part of the land in this landmass, in this subcontinent, because with treaties signed with the princes, the land under the control of the princes came under the control of the company government. But if there was land outside that, territory outside that, they did not know precisely how to handle that issue. And therefore, it was in London that all of the remaining land was turned over to the sovereign. It was brought under the sovereign control. And overnight, those who had controlled this land became the land owned by the British Crown, either the king or the queen. Now, these communities, such as the Bhils, the Santals, the Mundas, the Gonds, and hundreds of sub-communities within these four major umbrella groups, had been living there for centuries. In some cases, they have been there for 8 to 10,000 years, particularly in Madhya Pradesh. If you go to Bhimbetka, you see the rock paintings done by the ancestors of these people. The bones of the ancestors of these communities are lying there in the ground, and the small hills that we see, the Adivasi friends tell me, are made of the bones of their ancestors. Their worship patterns were different. Their social fabric was different. Their perspective on economy was different. Their take on the environment was different. Their dreams were different. The way their unconscious was constituted was different. The way they related to the past and the present was different. And this very different civilization, an entire continent of civilization, got submerged under these unfair colonial laws. After independence, they have remained mainly ignored and neglected. And where there are success stories, those success stories, such as Professor Mins, for instance, or my very dear friend who is no more, Professor Ramdayal Munda, these are success stories because of enormous effort of individuals. The Adivasis are today in this country living a life of unequal opportunity. The amount of struggle an Adivasi has to make in order to come to a level with others is a very huge struggle, because education in the mother tongue is not possible, because the access to healthcare and education is not easy, and the social attitude of the rest of the society has invariably that of contempt. And if not contempt, it is a quiet resentment, People do not say so, but it is in their minds that when an Adivasi gets into civil services or foreign service or becomes a professor, it is thanks to the reservation given, without realizing that the Adivasis have fought bitter battles during the freedom struggle. The Adivasis have preserved long traditions of knowledge. Today, in our country, we have 9% of population which can be described as Janajatis or Adivasis, and the northeastern people included in the category, as well as some communities from Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand who are ex officio included, pro bono included in the category because they are born in a certain area such as Ladakh or in Lahore Spiti in Himachal Pradesh or in the northern districts of Uttarakhand. I think these communities are the future of the mankind. In times where the human society has entered Anthropocene, when human society has crossed all the tipping points that have made our equation with environment an unequal equation, an irreversible equation. I think the Adivasi way of life, the indigenous way of life, is a model for our future. But we have never realized this because we have never looked at the world from the eyes of the Adivasi. We have always made the Adivasi an anthropological curiosity, a museum piece, some strange people to be paraded near the India Gate in Delhi on the 26th January. I think we need to apologize to the Adivasi communities in the country, just as the Prime Minister of Australia apologized to all the indigenous people in 2008, leading to the UNESCO, the United Nations resolution for the indigenous, declaration for the indigenous people. I feel a bit saddened to mention this, that the government of India, even today, has not signed the treaty, the declaration on the indigenous people, and the government of India does not allow the use of term indigenous within the Indian context. I think this is time not just to celebrate one day a year, but all round the year to look at who the Adivasis are, what they have with them, what they have done for this country, what they can give to all of us. And it is time for all the others to repent for what we have done to the Adivasis, regret our ignorance about the Adivasis. It is time for us to start learning from people who have knowledge, to give dignity to that knowledge, and to eradicate the imbalance in our knowledge stock in this country. If we have a Manuvadi government, and if only Brahmins are considered fit for knowledge, then our Adivasis do not have a future. We need to realize that a lot of valuable things, music, literature, medicine, in our Indian tradition is a contribution of many forest dwellers in the past. In the past, in Mruchakatikam, I go to a Sanskrit play to conclude what I have to say. There is a large scale, it's a play by Sudraka. A large scale rebellion is brewing in the forest, while the kings in the capital are all drowned in luxury and self-praise. Today in India, we are in a similar situation, because when an Adivasi raises her or his voice, it is seen as sedition. Many individuals who have been speaking in favor of Adivasi rights are in jail, and the civil society, the society, has not raised its voice in favor of these individuals. I think we must rethink seriously on the question of the indigenous, protect them, respect them, carry them with us, be one with them, and then alone the great dream of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar of having an inclusive India will become true. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Professor Devi. I think we'll join you again. We'll join you again after Professor Mins. Professor Mins, thank you. Can you join us?
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
Yeah. Please go on. Please go on, and we'll pick up the discussion.
Yeah. Do let me know if I'm audible enough.
You are very clear.
Is my mic okay?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. At the outset, again, I would like to echo what Dr. Ganesh Devi, Professor Ganesh Devi mentioned about.
When you put on the video, we'll see. We can. Is it possible?
I have switched on my video. Shall I switch it off? My video is on. Hello. Okay. Yeah. So in case there is a trouble with audio, then probably I'll switch off the video so that at least the audio part will go on smoother.
Yeah, please go on. Please go on. We can see you and we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to echo Professor Ganesh Devi in commending your efforts to mark the International Day of World's Indigenous Peoples today. In fact, yesterday being a Sunday, at United Nations also, it would be celebrated on 10th of August, that is today here, and maybe as the sun goes and according to their time. So want to thank French Institute of Pondicherry to have taken up and to celebrate and to be deliberating on at least some aspect within an hour that is possible. And I've heard so much about Professor Ganesh Devi and have only had a desire to meet him. I wish there is a time post COVID when we can meet. However, I think as it was mentioned, it is a good combination that you have brought the two of us to be deliberating on matters which are close to close to us. One is Professor Devi, who has devoted his life to the languages of the Adivasis in this country. And he was churning out numbers, and he was also talking about the
Professor, maybe we'll now switch off the video because the voice is breaking. Maybe there's this problem.
Yeah. So as I was mentioning, Professor Devi was devoted his life to the study of these languages which are spoken primarily by Adivasis, and he has made immense study, and he in himself is a repository of valuable knowledge that so many of us would have would have to take lots of time to unfold and understand, because he is a repository of all the Adivasi languages, and right now I'm unable to recollect all the words I wanted to describe him about. However, as it was being mentioned, few of us who are from inside these communities who are categorized under the Constitution of India as scheduled castes, and are also, and we also try to claim that we are indigenous peoples of this country or this land mass, because some of our tribes who are mainly found in central India, you would find our tribes people also in Bangladesh and also in Nepal. And so, there must have been reasons why this kind of spread has happened. But anyway, right now sitting in India, and some of us, the density that is prevailing in India, some of the tribes, we are all bunched together constitutionally with certain provisions as it has been spelled out very categorically. And just the scheduled tribes, our population as per the previous census, that was 11, is 8.08%. And as each is distinct, but there are so many complexities and complex complex characteristics that it becomes easy for people not to, or at least the decision makers, not to group us and also get away by expressing their inability to do so. But then history history records as to how and why at this time, I mean, in present times, there is a stigma that prevails. And therefore, each Adivasi in this country would, if possible, would like not to be identified. Now, in some cases, the physical features, the facial features defy, and therefore it is possible to identify people, I mean, our friends from Northeast, and therefore there are certain communities in Northeast which are not tribes, but then everybody gets bunched up as STs from Northeast. So these are some of the complexities about the appearances and the physical features. Likewise, our languages are also so distinct, and therefore to make a policy on education and also mother tongue education has been a long battle. And only now in the now it is called National Policy for Education, National Education Policy 2020, and we have various other thoughts about it, but there is one thing which has come out now, that it says in the power of language, and a section which is section 4 and the clauses 4.11, that's where they start talking about multilingual and the power of languages. And therefore for the primary education. Hello?
Is your microphone is close, quite close?
Yes.
Because your voice is breaking. Just to check that and it will be okay. Yeah.
Professor, her voice is coming very clear to me. So there may be something wrong with the gadget that you are using, because I can hear her with great clarity. The voice is not breaking.
Yeah, okay. Maybe it is something on our end. But anyway, Professor Mills, please continue. Please continue. Go on, please.
Okay, thank you. So I was talking about probably the complexities and distinct complexities due to the diversity and distinctness of each diverse aspect, which has been a characteristic, but has also been a reason for why a united policy or a policy that could cover and be comprehensive towards comprehensive benefit of the 8.08% population of the country, okay, who are identified as scheduled tribe, and most of them are Adivasis or indigenous peoples or Moolwasi also, and the terms that are maybe used in other places such as First Nation people, Aborigines, and etc. etc. I was also mentioning the diversity and distinctness is also such that some of the tribes in India are also found in Nepal and Bangladesh, but that just does not give any excuse why a comprehensive policy for inclusion, dignity, and equality be practiced. Okay, because we do have lots and lots of provisions, but then at the implementation level, I think there are either difficulties or probably intentions lack. But then I would like to also come around to mention that as Professor Devi was recollecting the colonial laws, which are partly responsible for the kind of stigma and the deprivation that has been an outcome of these laws, but then some sojourners of the colonizers also can be given some credit for the kind of spread of modern education to indiscriminately they did. And so part of being indiscriminate about their commitment, I would like to again mention the sojourners of the colonizers. Their commitment to education and health was so indiscriminate that part of that also reached the tribals, the Adivasis, and even the Dalits and all those who had been the most deprived populations of this country. And therefore, I think we do have, besides the kind of stigma and the humiliation, discrimination, and everything that can deter a child from access, which may be possible also or may not be possible, the access to modern education. Uh, Still, we can have some success stories, and had there not been these schools where my grandparents went to school only class 1 and class 4. Okay, so practically beyond class 4, I'm a second generation from one side and third generation from the other side of my parents. And therefore, when education has been for the second generation or the third generation, I think the fight becomes easier for one, because probably the impact of health has or the health facilities have been better. The access to health and whatever kind of education that has been possible has been better, because there has been appreciation for modern education. Now, there can be a debate between the modern education and the knowledge heritage, the heritage of knowledge the indigenous people or the Adivasis sit over, or they enjoy, and they have preserved also. Likewise, it cannot denied that the way the natural resources have been protected by the Adivasis, and also that this protection has only happened in the places where the Adivasis live. So if we put some of these facts together, I think each country, and especially in India, others who aren't tribals or scheduled tribes, Adivasis, do need to acknowledge that whatever degradation to the environment that has happened could have been far worse had we not had Adivasis being resistant to what is also called development. And therefore, I've been trying to think over these two aspects for the past few days. And from 7th of August in the city of Dumka, we have had various programs. I am in my university, Sidikano University at the moment, which is situated in Dumka. It is a district also in Santhal Pargana, and Santhal Pargana is in the eastern part of Jharkhand. Yeah, so I have been toying with this idea, not being a student of social science or even trained as a social scientist, but coming from, trained as a mathematician. I think I feel that there is, and also being a teacher of computer science, I think it is time that we started, or at least the Adivasis start defining what we think is development. Because if there are still things to learn from the practices, the cultural, which have been also preserved because it is part of the culture, such as not to till the land in the 7th year, keep a part of the field, not to till them and not to cultivate every year, and which also gives room for so many of other preservative things to do, not to harm the forest, not to allow abuse of water, and so and such other resources. So when the interest of people is considered by the administrators, although in provisions such as PESA and other things in the states where there are tribal prevalent regions, it is imperative and it is necessary that the decisions be consultative. Yet, I feel it is time we looked at alternate definitions of terms such as development. It is. I also feel the second thing I feel is that I think it is this. The second thing is for us Adivasis definitely to do that. There be one unifying umbrella, not only term, but a sense of fraternity should be cultivated, that so that we get strengthened by each other's presence. And so that instead of being known as an Urao woman myself, instead of that, I need to see that larger family, the fraternity. Coming to the, some of the now opportunities of having dignity is, I see a little, just a small streak of ray of hope in the National Education Policy, as I was trying to recollect in the clause 4.11 and thereafter up to 4.13, I think. It talks about mother tongue education, or it, not only uses the word mother tongue, but says home language. Okay, so education in primary classes in school be in the home language or mother tongue. It is in the United Nations documents also recorded that 40% of the 7,000 languages are at the brink of being extinguished. That is solely because they are not used in teaching learning space. And therefore, if we have a mother tongue education, then that would be one way of stopping the extinction of these languages. Or preventing that, but that will also require a whole lot of exercises, and the academia has to deal with it as to whether it is going to impact the pedagogy or not, because we cannot have just a translation of certain terms. If in the Santhal Pargana, if there isn't apple which is cultivated, we cannot be talking about apple here. Right, so those cultural adaptations. So that now it will require more exercise for us, but then I think the attitudinal change is also required, so that when the adaptation is also brought in, I think it would have its equal standing and dignity with that of what is known as the dominant knowledge. And now each of these activities, now the teaching learning in the mother tongue, and then probably the pedagogic methodologies changes, will they be given that equal recognition as knowledge to the corpora of in the academia or academic spaces? So those would be the questions that I would like to toe with in my tenure here in this university, because this university is situated in the area which is tribal dominated area. In fact, in the entire state of Jharkhand, the reservation for scheduled tribes is 24%. So that talks about the kind of population percentage. However, in Santhal Pargana, it is even higher. Okay, so probably there is an opportunity for a university such as Sidhu Kanu Murmu University to consider languages which are beyond Santhali language, which is the highest population speaks this language, but there are other languages too. So this is an opportunity also to bring other languages to the university domain, and also use these for knowledge, contribution of knowledge, and also I think I've somehow slipped off my head. But then on this, on this International Day of World Indigenous Population, World Indigenous Peoples, I think it is important also to remember that we could have, as Professor Devi was mentioning, we could have some national days also. On the International Day, we may sensitize ourselves or even learn about others. But on national days, we could do introspection or self-reflection and also decide our own course of journey ahead. And so with these words, I would like to conclude, and probably more thoughts might come in the Q&A section. I want to thank once again the organizers of this webinar, Professor Khannan and Professor Chandran and others in the team for reaching me and making me part of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Would you like to reflect on Professor Min's thoughts?
Well, I resonate with
Professor Devi, are you there?
Yes,
we are unable to hear you.
Professor, what Professor Min said. Yeah, please say. Every word of what Professor Min said is a result of her life experience and her experience as an extremely well-trained mathematician working at the forefront of the disciplines at a university like the JNU. Indeed, these communities need greater respect and consideration. I give one example. Recently, the present government passed the Citizenship Amendment Act. And we all know that it made space for Jains, Sikhs, Parsis, Hindus, Christians, barring the Muslims, which I did not like. It's not good for the constitution. But I'm not coming to that. There is a point which our entire country, those who were in favor of the act, as well as those who were opposing the act, they forgot. And that point is, the minorities coming from Bangladesh to Assam or West Bengal do not include only Jains, Parsis, Sikhs, Hindus, Christians. There are 12 tribal minorities according to the census of Bangladesh. And those 12, such as Mru, such as Garo, such as Kasi, Chakmas, Karen, they all have been migrant traditionally. Since the Brahmaputra changes its course, these people are lived by along the banks of Brahmaputra, and therefore when the course of the river changes, they are moved from one place to another place, traditionally for thousands of years. But neither our government, nor the lawmakers, nor those who are opposing that act had a word to say about those tribal communities, people who have come from Bangladesh to Assam. This goes to show that when we make provision for development, any kind of provision, we are completely impervious of the tribal viewpoint. Let me take another example. Very soon, we are going to reformulate our provisions for mining. It is coming up in the next parliament. I doubt if the tribal communities in Orissa, almost 60 communities, the tribal communities in Goa, and tribal communities, there are tribal communities even in Goa, and tribal communities in Meghalaya will be consulted on this, because the communities that suffer when it comes to mining are the communities, tribal communities from Meghalaya, Goa, and Orissa. Of course, in other states, it's the same story. But When we think of mining activity, we have consultation with industries, commerce, scientists, and the general administration, but not the tribal communities. When we change laws related to forest, we don't consult the Adivasis. Laws related to minerals, we don't consult them. When there are river disputes, say the river dispute between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, which has been almost 3 to 4 decade old river dispute on both sides of Karnataka, north and south. It is Krishna as well as Kaveri. The tribal communities are not taken into confidence. Do not their livelihoods matter for us? Are these non-people? Are these non-citizens? I think it's a very sad commentary on the entire society that we have been so indifferent to the tribals. And one thing that we must add, is Sidhu Kanu, it is Birsa Munda, it is Umaji Nayak, it is Tantya Bhil. These people wage freedom fights. They were not fighting for individual cases. They were fighting for the entire country against the British rule. The tribals are not seen as freedom fighters. Occasionally, some decorative, action, symbolic action is put forward, but there is no substantial, genuine, sincere effort to include the tribe, as Professor Means so very poignantly said, to think inclusively about them. Australia is making those efforts today. And we need to learn both from Australia and from the young Prime Minister of New Zealand. Otherwise, we'll go the way the Latin American countries have gone and cause extermination of people who are primarily non-violent, primarily nature-loving, and primarily extremely knowledgeable about many things. We have no idea. We do not have enough. We not made enough assessment of the tribal knowledge stock. So I think today is the day, as Mahatma Gandhi said in the last page of Hind Swaraj. This is the time for repentance. The country must repent, regret for what it has done to the tribals. The only good thing that was done probably was to think of returning their land titles to them. The land was with them, they had been tilling, but land titles. But the implementation, as was pointed out, was not as it should have been. And despite a good act of the related to tribal land, forest land, the delivery has been far from being satisfactory. I feel pained. I was a professor of English, doing very well in my English literature, traveling to European countries. But when I came close to the Adivasi communities in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, I said, one life is not enough. Whatever I have, I should dedicate to this cause, because these are great people and we have not even the slightest idea of what they are. To think of, where you are in Pondicherry, what is done to the Todas in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala. I mean, this CK Janu has been fighting a lonely battle, and the Todas are now reduced to a very, very minuscule minority of the population of Tamil Nadu. Great posters of great leaders I see in Chennai. But have we ever put up the posters celebrating the tribal wisdom? Because there in Tamil Nadu, the human population, as the modern genetics shows, Professor David Rick has done his work with the help of Hyderabad-based CCMB. 45,000 years history of existence. What have we done to the accumulated wisdom of those thousands of years, which the Zena Kurubas, the Korubas preserved? They know more about wax and therefore prevention of epidemics than any manufacturer of Vaseline sitting in Navsari or in Haryana. I feel pained about our indifference, our ignorance. I think this is time to open our eyes and look at the Adivasi wisdom and people and their existence and their arts and culture and music and dance and literature, traditions. Tribals are known for headhunting in Meghalaya. But please tell me if there is one example of tribals fighting over religions. But the non-tribals in the country have fought over. You know, some people went and knocked down the Babri Masjid, some others are celebrating Ram. No tribal war over God has taken place in the entire history of humanity. Shall we not think of them as far more civilized than we are? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Devi. Professor Mins, I would like to have your comments, and I would also like to know the actual at present now, what is the lockdown situation in Jharkhand? We would even like to know about how the tribal people they fare during this lockdown. Could you please enlighten us on this?
Thank you. Yes, during this lockdown period, of course, until early June, when I arrived here on 9th of June, we didn't have more than 2 cases in the entire 6 districts. Okay, and that too were of those who had come from the neighboring states. They had gone to one had come from Bengal and one had come from Bihar. So that is the statistics as of 10th of June 2020. Okay, so that, which means before that we didn't have any case, and only in the month of July we have been having cases increase, but these cases also have been in the districts. I wouldn't be able to tell you the number today, but then these have been in the districts which are adjacent to Bengal or Bihar. And because in those districts in Bengal, the cases are much higher, and the districts in Bihar, also Bhagalpur, which has got much higher rates of positive, which are there. But primarily, the communities who have lived here, and they have been fine. One can always say that we don't have so much of testing test facilities, and therefore probably they are going undetected. But then I think it is also important to see how many people actually get to come to the hospitals or health centers. We've had news how the primary health centers are functional here, and we have not had so many people coming with symptoms of COVID. Whoever seems to have doubted, they have gone and done the tests, and I think good percentage have been always tested negative. So the kind of lifestyle, I think what needs to be investigated is also besides the physical distancing and trying to prevent or trying to minimize interaction with others, I think there are reasons why the immunity of people in this region, and mostly tribals, is better than those in the neighboring states and neighboring districts also. Also, the number of cases, as I said, which was in adjacent districts that to Bhagalpur and West Bengal, we have had people, the migrant laborers, come back to these districts too. So these are these two reasons why we have cases of COVID, more positive cases of COVID in these districts. I would trust the health facility is uniform in the entire state, but only and therefore certain districts are showing up cases and certain districts are not. So we do have we have this really the lifting of lockdown in phases, but the number of cases are not rising as it is seen in other places. So people have continued to do their normal duties, in the sense, in the workplaces such as offices. We do not still have full-fledged attendance. We also have our school and colleges are still not open for physical classrooms, but you see all our agricultural people are continuing with their whatever they have to do. The transplantation of paddy is happening right now. There has been good rain, but we do not have the rate of increase of cases is much lesser than the national average and even the average of the neighboring states.
Professor, I have one more simple observation. Behind you, I see Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, and next to it, I also see a two. We cannot see it very clearly. Could you please tell us those two figures are? We can see bow and arrow, but we cannot clearly identify.
Thank you.
Please tell us about them.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. You'd see on my right, this side, there are two figures. One of them is Sidhu Murmu and the other is Kanhu Murmu. They were two brothers. They had two other brothers and two sisters. Chand and Bhairo were the two more brothers, and Phulo and Janu were their sisters. So this was the family of 6 siblings, and Sidhu and Kanhu were the leaders of the rebellion. It is okay. Yes, thank you, Professor Devi. See, the fight that they took up was termed as a rebellion. Okay, the tribal rebellion of 1855, whereas they fought the levy system that was imposed by the British. So historically, it was rebelling against the colonizers and not just a rebellion. Okay, so these are the two brothers after whom this university has been named. One of them, in so doing, to lead the movement, one of them was declared by the population as the king, and the other was considered to be the other leader. And the two sisters also contributed equally in providing the required arms at that time, and then also informing and sending the information to the villages, to the other villages. So these are the great leaders under with whose name this university has been named.
And I think now I would like to invite the audience, if they have observations and response or questions to Professor Devi or Professor Mins. Please go ahead. Introduce yourself and unmute and introduce yourself and go ahead, please.
This is Anupama.
Good afternoon, everybody. Frédéric Landy speaking as the director of the French Institute of Pondicherry. First, let me thank all the participants, and especially the two speakers for their brilliant talk. And I welcome everybody in spite of sometimes a very difficult connection for this webinar. Just my question is related to the COVID and the aftermath of stranded workers trying to go back to their villages. We have seen such an exodus almost everywhere in India. As Mr. Kannan said, a lot of these migrants are from indigenous communities, maybe not so many in comparison with their proportion in the total Indian population, but it's another matter. My question is, do you think that the crisis and the tragedy they had to undergo, being unemployed in cities and then trying to go back to their place of origin, do you think that in the future we'll see a reduction of migration for these tribal people, considering that they will try to live more on their own in their village, in their local towns and cities, instead of trying to get some income in cities? Personally, I don't think so, but I know that some people advocated even more the sustainable development, autonomy, not only at the national level, as the Prime Minister said, but also at the local level. So maybe this could be one opportunity for trying to develop even more these backward areas that are said to be the tribal areas in India.
If I may respond to that, can I go ahead and respond, or should we take a few more questions?
Please go on and respond, please. Yeah.
I think we will have to wait and watch for the two reasons. One is it's from Dumka, the chief minister, soon after I had arrived, probably it was on 13th of June itself, he was here to flag off a train which was ready to take laborers to Ladakh. Okay. So in spite of, so that is an indication for me that the population or people, those who were going to go as laborers to Ladakh from this region, Santhal Pargana region, were either not scared at all of the pandemic, or they have been so pushed to the corner by the poverty or their conditions, living conditions, that they were willing to go again back to Ladakh. Some of them had come and some of them were going back, and some new laborers were going. So this is a fact of the matter. We would have to inquire into it as to what drove them to go back. This is I'm talking about the instance of 13th of June. Okay. The second thing is now this period since June and July, they tell me that the rains after a long time have been good. And so there is a lot of agricultural activity. So we may have to wait to see after the agricultural activities are over if people would want to go and for the seasonal as seasonal labors. So these are the two things I would like to point out at the moment. But I'm a data scientist and I like to wait and watch the data before making certain conclusions. So these are my anticipations only.
Any other member of the audience have some questions? Yeah. Anyone?
I had put it on the chat. This is Anupama. So I really appreciated Professor Devi's point about the fact that tribals are not consulted, because I've been actually studying this draft EIA 2020 because the deadline for giving the feedback on that is near, and it totally doesn't take into account anything about the environmental impact, and they don't ask the people in the environment about it. So this is the point I had already mentioned. It's not a question, it's just a comment.
Thank you, Anupama. Yeah, it was a pertinent point Professor Devi made. Yes.
Yes.
Professor Devi, would you like to add?
Well, Anupama's comment was a comment. Very few words she used, but it's a scathing criticism of the way policy works. I can give you another example. Now there is a Rashtriya Suraksha University bill coming up. And in that, there should have been a concern for the tribal history and provision for accommodating them with a spatially higher quota of reservation. I do not see it in the bill at all, and there is nobody raising that. The bill will now come up in the next parliament, pass through in a GP, everybody will put up their hands, and forever the tribals will be once again forgotten. So at the moment, the land is reduced to 1 acre or half acre per family. 2 generations back, it used to be 10 acres. I mean, in the central India and western India. 1 generation back, it was 2 to 3 acres. Now it is 1 acre or half acre. And therefore, this seasonal migration is multiplying. People we saw walking hundreds of kilometers when an ill-advised lockdown came suddenly as an axe falling from heaven or hell. It was these people who died on the train tracks. It is because we do not at all think of how tribals will cope with all the new changes we're making in everything. So Anupama's used very few words, but here is one more example. I mean, I have been watching since the last 3 decades, every parliamentary act which has bearing on tribal life has gone through without due consultation with tribals. And though we have in the constitution provision for them, the spirit of the constitution is violated by not consulting them. And if somebody speaks about these things, that person is booked under UAPA. We need to make this a big issue in the country and have a national debate on whether we really treat tribals as equal and full citizens or not. Thank you.
I would like to pose this observation to both of you, in a sense that in this paradigm, with reference to the indigenous people, how do you see one point of view which sees them as isolated, and another which we see them taking part in the development as the government says? How do you see this contradiction Could you please, I will expect both of you to respond to this. In a sense, I will say the spectrum between the two ends of the spectrum, isolation and development.
May I answer it first?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Means. It was Varier Elvin who observed the life of Adivasis in central India, particularly in what is now Chhattisgarh and partly in Madhya Pradesh, and then in Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh. And on the basis of his observations, he came up with a policy called Panchashil. Nehru accepted that. It was Nehru's foreword to Varier Elvin's book. how to deal with the Northeast. And that forward became an unstated, implicit policy of keeping the Adivasis secluded without sending too many engineers from outside, too many outsiders to interfere with their traditional way of life. The next came in 1999 with Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government, and a ministry was created. Till then, we did not have a Ministry of Tribal Affairs. A MOTA did not exist till that date. And it was the BJP, the NDA rather, decided that they should be included. Now look at this. It is we who decide whether they should be excluded or kept excluded. Or it is we who decide whether they should be included. Have we ever had a referendum on this, taking the views of all indigenous, Adivasi, Mool Nivasi, Janajatis, nomadic communities, and pastoral and semi-nomadic communities, what they want? Are they a child and us, their parents, for them to decide what education is good, what is good for that child? So the question is not whether we should keep them excluded or we should have them included. The question is, we must learn to listen to the Adivasis and find out from them what they want. They might want a combination of the two. Who knows? Thank you.
Professor Mills?
Yeah, I think in continuation, I would have said the same thing. If we go to the market, we just go from shop to shop until we find the thing we want to buy, right? And I think, for an Adivasi, definitely, it is a tough call at an individual level, whether to practice and be in person and spirit and everything with the cultural setup and in the village, or to acquire education and move on to what is considered as modern and developed. Okay, so it's at an individual level, it's a tough call. But then we do make choices, and therefore some have also made choices, as I have been referring to, 2 to 3 generations. I think people, at least in central India and some other places, it could be just the first generation who will be bombarded with these questions and having to make choices. Okay, it's been the flavor that has continued is remain rooted, but look forward and upward, because it seems like a race towards modernity, and where everybody else is running, so why shouldn't I be running too? But remain rooted in the culture. And so it is so very important also for us to not leave the language. And so because of the onslaught of modern education also, there has been, and I have no qualms in making a mention of this, there has been a loss of the language, mother tongue also, I think around 60s, 70s, up to 80s. But that consciousness of having that loss has also hit us, and then there has been a desire to restore. So these are the tough choices that Adivasis and Adivasis as a community also would have to deal with. And I think there again we would have to make our choices. But in so doing, I think what is one thing that we would expect, because this is how we would treat a non-Adivasi is, the kind of dignity of as an equal that we would like to give to the other, the reciprocation of the same is what is expected. Because when I speak my language in a marketplace, I should not have weird looks staring at me. Because when somebody else speaks their mother tongue in the marketplace? Why is that looked up with reverence? I fail to understand the disparity or disparate treatment, and therefore, it's the dignity with which each one is treated equally. I think we'll be able to make our choices as our personal choices, and probably these will not be posed as a moral dilemma. Thank you.
Once again, I'm asking the audience whether I see many young people have joined the webinar. Do you have any questions or observations, please?
Hello. Good evening, Kannan, Professor Devi, and Professor Mintz. This is Vignesh from Coimbatore. I have a question. In what way Australian and New Zealand government differs India regards to indigenous people?
Can you please repeat?
In what way they differ from Indian government? What they are doing? Can you give some insights on Australian and New Zealand government? What they are doing compared to, because in the webinar, Professor Devi added regarding Australian and New Zealand government are doing well on indigenous people. What they are doing, what we are not doing. I had a question on it.
In 2008, the Australian Prime Minister tendered a public apology to all the indigenous people and accepted that it was their land which the white settlers had occupied. So this was a candid confession coming straight from the Prime Minister. The second thing, they created a national center for tribal arts in their capital and made a law, provided a policy directive that when tribal artists are invited to shows, they be treated, their fees be paid at par with any other artist. Now, this appears to be a non-statement in a way, but I can say that in Bhopal we have the Bharat Bhavan where very great singers go and painters go and paint, and then next door there is the Museum of Man where tribal Adivasi artists go and sing, and the Gonds, the Bhils, the Santals, they go and paint there. The fees paid to the mainstream singer and painter are in lakhs or thousands, and those paid to tribal singers and painters are in tens or hundreds. This is the attitude. The attitude change was caused by the Australian Prime Minister's lead, and you will be happy to know that whenever a public function begins in Australia, all of them first offer a prayer to the tribal ancestors in Australia on whose land they are. In our country, we're fighting for whether we should have Saraswati Vandan or some other Vandan. I mean, I have nothing against Saraswati as such, but we often have taken away tribal land, used it for commercial purposes for our benefit, but have never paid any respect for those who made that sacrifice. I'll give you one example. The entire railway line from Howrah to Surat, I mean, if you look at the map of India, is laid on land which was taken away by tribal communities, because all along that railway track are tribal communities. This was done in 1870s. Among them, there is one community called Korku. The Korkus were given in exchange for that land, their ancestral land, some land which was not good for agriculture, the kind of agriculture that the Korkus knew. And as a result, they suffered from repeated malnutrition generation after generation. Now, we all know that tribals in the country have inherited sickle cell anemia from their ancestors almost 7,000 to 8,000 years before our time. This sickle cell is normally dormant, but it becomes manifest when material conditions change. And among the Korkus, today there is 34% sickle cell anemia. We have been talking a lot about corona, and we must do that, of course. But do you know, when we say that 34% suffer from sickle cell anemia, it means that 10% of those 34%, that's 3.4% Korkus, are doomed to die by the time they are 30, 31 or 32. That is what all studies related to sickle cell anemia show. So, because we got a train track, and Calcutta and Surat became very rich countries because of that train track, the Korkus are dying. But in our country, we have not replaced the land that we gave to the Korkus. We've done very little research about sickle cell. Absolutely no research about sickle cell. I'm saying this absolutely because this whole topic was, I had myself taken it to Delhi-based genome lab, which is next to the JNU. Professor Means knows that. It just as you walk past the ICSSR, there is the genome center, and I met Professor Virendra Chauhan. He did go and carried out almost 35,000 tests in Chhattisgarh. But the government did not release funding for any further research on that. Why? Because this is a disease by which only the tribals are afflicted. That is what the Australian government does not do, and we do. And in New Zealand, the Prime Minister has been the absolute manifestation of tolerance. And they have 6 universities specially made for the tribals there. That is the New Zealand tribals. Their population is very small. The population of New Zealand is probably smaller than the population of a city like Bombay or Delhi. 6 universities are created for tribal studies. Yesterday, a publisher, Routledge Publishers, launched 5 of my books. They're called Key Concepts in Tribal Studies, contributors from 24 countries. The publisher told me that even before the books were launched, orders have come from New Zealand for that series, because they are interested in the Maoris. We are not interested with the Lahul Spiti people, or the Naga people, or the Munda people, or the Orans. Do you know what? Every time we celebrate Dashera, every time, there is a community on the border of Bengal and Bihar, Jharkhand, Asur community. How much ridicule the children of that community suffer from every time during puja. But we have not founded any counseling centers for them. They go through a trauma. Every year they have to pass through a trauma, just because the community is called Asur community. There are, I can, heart-rending stories I can go on telling, and it makes one's blood boil. But we can change this situation by entirely constitutional methods. Professor Means put her finger right on the absolute the heart of the problem. She said the tribals are divided ethnically because of endogamy, And like Ambedkar could mobilize and bring together what we call today the scheduled castes, and gave this formula of organize, educate, organize, and agitate. That has not been possible with tribals. Professor Means actually said that, it was implied in what she was saying, that it is time that we think all of them as one, educate them, organize them, and then their agitated mental state will result into a change in the social attitude. Thank you.
Professor Mills, would you like to conclude?
Yeah, I just might, I would like to add, I want to thank Professor Devi for making all those contributions by telling exactly what Australian government and the New Zealand has done. But I would like to point out, if one thing, I tried to do that a couple of years ago, and yesterday again, I was trying to find by Google Translate what would be the translation of indigenous in Hindi. And to my surprise, and I hope you are surprised too, the Hindi translation turns out to be Swadeshi. Okay, now I'm not trying to ridicule this thing, but this word, but this is exactly what has been said time and again since the beginning of working group on UN working group on indigenous peoples, that our country has been saying we don't have specific peoples group as indigenous peoples. In fact, everybody is indigenous. That's the statement of the formal statement of our government. Okay, so therefore one had to fight to bring the word tribal also included, and therefore now in the United Nations it is also sometimes, and in ILO conventions it is used, the phrase indigenous and tribal people. So therefore, Professor Devi had really listed out many things, but I would just like to mention one more. You know, in Norway, there is something called Sami. There are Sami tribes, so there is a Sami parliament, and the parliament of Norway does not function without taking cognizance of the recommendations of Sami Parliament whenever it is a matter of developmental projects. So these are various things we see as to how various other nations are working in a progressive manner, actually living out, practicing democracy or democratic processes. But I think we lag behind quite a lot. It's a long battle, but then see, I don't only would like to mention it. It's a struggle for Adivasis and tribals of this country, but it is a struggle or a painful situation which only displays disparity and inequality. And if from all sides, or people from both sides of all dividing lines, if we try to say that we need to be treating each other equally, and therefore probably will be treated equally. So I think it boils down to the treatment as equals, and that is what we could strive for and look forward to.
As we have already gone beyond 1 hour for taking our time from our guests and everything. Do anyone among the audience have any questions for both the professors? Or otherwise, I would like to conclude and bring and conclude this webinar. No one? Okay. Professor Devi and Professor Mills, it was great, and it was such a revealing subject. I think this is the first time in the French Institute of Pondicherry, even through a webinar, we have discussed so deeply and so widely about the indigenous people and the tribal situation here. Because before in the French Institute, we are continuously studying the Dalit literature and Dalit culture in Tamil Nadu and South India. I think for the first time, the French Institute has come forward to host a webinar on tribal population and the situation in India. I think it was really a revealing and talk. I thank both of you for taking time from your schedule and talk with us. And I hope soon in the future, after we get out of this lockdown, we will be able to have you here in person to discuss with our students and researchers here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody who have joined us.
Thank you very much. I think I missed mentioning one word, that is Johar. This is how we greet in Santhal Pargana. So Johar to one and all.
Johar.
Thank you indeed. Professor Means, I'll be speaking to you again very soon.
Yes.
To invite you to speak to my friends in Maharashtra. I hope you'll take the invitation.
Thank you so much. It was great seeing you, virtually meeting. Yes.
Wonderful. You are our hope. You are our hope for this country. And I mean every word of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Devi. We will be having you soon here. We will be having you soon here. I'm looking forward to it.
Please, we'll meet very soon. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you indeed.